I'm sitting here with my dad, Kevin Frisbee, who has been an Eagles fan for over 30 years. He's going to tell us a little bit about his experience with the band and growing up in the era. How are you this morning, Dad?
I'm doing great, Claire. Thanks.
Great. So the first question is, how old were you when Hotel California first came out?
I was 14, almost 15 when
All
it
right.
came out.
See, this was in 1977, so we're talking to an old man here. Do you remember where you were and what you were doing the first time you heard the song?
Yes, I was in my basement in my house, and we had a pool table down there, and was playing pool. I had the radio on, and it came out on the radio.
And
And it was, well, first off, it was a really long song. So, the beat and the tempo and all that kind of stuff was something that was interesting. It was a little bit different, and then there was this huge storyline to it. So it kind of made you think about, you kind of, because the way the Eagles wrote most of their songs, you kind of had a vision of what they, it was like a story, and they're telling you a story, and they were bringing you into the story, and so you're like part of it, and it's almost like you're walking along with them through the storyline, and they're explaining it. So it was kind of cool. It draws you in like that.
okay. So what was it like growing up in the 70s, and how did the Eagles and their kind of music fit into the whole scene?
Well, the 70s was an interesting time because the 60s were really kind of a rough decade. There was a lot of political strife. There was a lot of bad things that happened, with the assassinations of the Kennedys and Martin Luther King and everything. And so it was really rambunctious. You had the Vietnam War was going on. You had, so on the news every night you're hearing about the war. You had, the economy was not real good. And it was just kind of, it was kind of a gloomy, almost pessimistic time. And there wasn't a lot of optimism. There wasn't a lot of, hope and optimism. Mm-hmm. Granted, I was a little kid, but the sense was kind of, it was kind of a dull, mundane decade. And so, but the good thing was that there was a lot of good music that came out of it because, after the Beatles started in the 60s and, rock and roll started moving and we started to see the evolution of it, you started to see some really amazing bands and music and everything that came out. And it really was kind of I think in a lot of ways, especially the early 70s was kind of like the height of rock. You had kind of two genres, you had the rock and roll people and then you had the disco people, that came like later in the 70s. And so, the real classic rock bands, like Aerosmith and Led Zeppelin and, if you could say rock for the Beach Boys, were really big during that time. And of course the Eagles and, some other, up and coming stars like Bob Seger and all that. So you had, if you think back, '69 was when they had the Woodstock, and then after that, a lot of the modern rock music emerged out of that.
So who else did you listen to during this time?
Well, I liked Aerosmith. I liked Led Zeppelin. I liked Bachman Turner Overdrive. They were really good. I liked the Eagles. Styx was a band that I listened to a lot. Those were probably the main ones.
So during this time, had you ever heard anything about the Satanic movement? Because that was up and coming as well.
Yeah, Hollywood and California, they always had storylines that went with things. And so, back in the 60s during the hippie era, it was really made a big deal through California and the movement there. Granted, they have good weather there all the time, so a lot of the protesters of the Vietnam War went there, and that kind of became the hippie movement and all that. But anyway, moving into the 70s, remind me of the question.
Were you aware of the Satanic movement?
Oh yeah, so yeah, it wasn't just like with this song came out, one of the some of the pundits and some of the people were talking about how it had satanical overtures and things like that. And Led Zeppelin also had a song that came out, Stairway to Heaven, that was really a huge hit. But I remember in grade school, people talking about, well, if you took their album and you spun it backwards, you'd hear them saying like things to the devil, some Satan kind of things. And it turns out that was never true, but every kid's like, oh, how cool. And so everybody's trying to do it with their album, and you can kind of make things appear like whatever you want them to
Right.
appear if you're led into it.
So did you ever hear that the conspiracy that Hotel California is about Satan?
Yes, I mean that. Like I said, that came out. It was almost kind of like, the '70s were a lot of culty kind of things, and so the occult was kind of an underlying theme, and so people looked for that. You got to remember that our parents' generation, they grew up with Frank Sinatra and those kinds of things, and so this kind of music was really radical. It was noisy, it was loud, and so. And a lot of the messages they thought were really bad for kids to have and everything. So, of course, it would get, news and interest.
Right. So we kind of covered the hippie movement, but what was that like? Was it a part of your life at all?
No, I was too young to be in the hippie movement. That was kind of, people that were, 6 to 10 years older than me. But, what it was like, it was people that were protesting the status quo, the normal of society, the the whole idea of the family unit and certain cultural norms that we had, where you go to school, then you get a job, and you get married, and you have kids, and you do all these things. It's all in a nice sequential order, and everybody's happy and nice. And the hippie era kind of brought in. First off, they brought in a lot of the drug thing, and so the drugs took you away from reality anyway. And so then it was kind of the beginning of the feel-good generation that you can do whatever you want, whatever feels good is what's good for you, regardless of the impact that it has on others. And kind of, it really was a turn toward yourself as the center of the universe, and and then. As time went on, you see more and more of that happen. And whereas before, like when I grew up, the big thing was, your parents worried on how you looked to others outside, and whether you were, it was important to be a good participant in society and not, and do what's best for all and not necessarily for yourself. And so. And a lot of this was bred out of the war, the Vietnam War. It was a very controversial thing because it wasn't really a war, but yet we had Americans over there getting killed. We really didn't have any real goal to the end of it, and so it wasn't presented to the American people like a typical, like up to that we had World War I, World War II, where there was a bad guy enemy and you had to defeat him to save the world. Well, this wasn't really saving the world. It was some bad guys that were over there, but it was more of a way of life, communism and all that, and the idea that communism might spread all over the world, and then the whole world would be against us, and so we had to nip it out early. And so people were being drafted into the military at that time, and they didn't want to go, and then they're being killed for something that they can't even. It's not even really, in their view, a just cause. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what the hippies was really a protest to all of the cultural norms that existed in society.
Right. So from research I've done and what I've read about Hotel California being about possibly being about the satanic movement, I personally feel like it's just the Eagles' way of explaining the high life in California then and what it was like for them in the corrupted music industry. So can you explain a little bit about the high life in California then and like what you experienced or what you've heard about it?
Yeah, California, I think when I was growing up at that time was still, this amazing place where it's excellent weather all the time, and people were happy, and there was lots to do, and lots of progress, and lots of activity, and it was beautiful. It had mountains, desert, forest. It had whatever you needed, kind of thing. Large state, beautiful state, and and that's where all the popular, TV shows and music and everything. That's where everything was coming from, California. So it was kind of this idyllic environment that everybody wanted to go to California to see California and to experience the California lifestyle, which was becoming more and more. First off, it was pretty affluent because there was a lot of money out there with Hollywood and all that kind of stuff. But there was also the beauty of the area and the ability to think differently about things, because there was more freedom and free time to do things.
So, do you think it's changed any since then?
California?
Mm-hmm.
I think so. Well, from my perspective, it has, because having gone there and seen it and everything, they had a population explosion, and so it got extremely overcrowded. It really, the crowds and the traffic and all the other kinds of things that go with living there. I think also, as you get older, you start to see people that went out there to live the California dream, and it really never came true to them, because it's like everywhere else. You got to work hard, and you got to have some good fortune and things like that, and it doesn't, that kind of fame and fortune doesn't come to everybody, and nor do a lot of people after they get involved in all that really want to be part of that. But as a state, it's a beautiful state. It's just one that I wouldn't want to live there. I like to visit. I don't mind living. I don't want to live there.
So how did the Eagles' music fit the genre of the 1970s music scene?
Well, their music was, it was a little different in that, it wasn't the really hard rock that you saw with Led Zeppelin and all that kind of stuff and the psychedelic stuff. It was more ballads and stories, and it in a sense, they kind of charted their own course. They didn't just join in like all the bands were doing the same kind of thing. It was just almost cookie cutter. They went a completely different direction. They had the harmonized voices. They had all that stuff, and I think what they did by doing that is they kind of defined the the lifestyle, the idyllic lifestyle of California. Very whimsical, very enchanting, very desirable, and so they kind of encapsulated all that through their storylines, and kind of created almost a mental image of what California stood for.
Right. So would you say that's, in a sense, the American dream that people would talk about?
I think so, because a lot of what, like I said, a lot of what you saw in TV shows and movies and everything was kind of like the dream of Americans, and these guys were kind of talking to all that too. And so it was, I'd say that they probably encapsulated a whole generation of people. What other music can you listen to that can instantly put you back in a time or a place, and a feeling inside about what's going on or what you were doing at a point in life when you heard it? It's really amazing.
So you think the song Hotel California really makes that clear?
Yeah, I think it's probably, it was probably, in my view, one of the most important songs of the whole generation.
Well, great. Thanks for speaking with me today. I really appreciate your time.
Anytime, Claire.
It's been a pleasure.
Love you.